On November 27, 2015, the day after Thanksgiving, 3 children sat on a cold bathroom floor in Salinas, California, listening to the sound of forks scraping plates 10 feet away. They could smell roasted turkey, hear laughter, hear the clink of glasses. They received nothing, not a single bite. The bathroom measured 2 feet 9 inches by 5 feet 8 inches, smaller than a standard prison cell. The children had been locked inside, naked, for days. When the door finally opened the next morning, one of them, driven by hunger so severe it overrode fear, had stolen a single bagel. That theft would cost 2 of them their lives. This is not a story from a distant country or a forgotten era. This happened in California, in a state with a $50 million social services budget in the wealthiest nation in human history. And it happened despite 5 separate visits from social workers who looked at these children, documented their condition, and walked away. Before we go deeper, subscribe if you love true crime documentaries, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The children's names were Sean, Delilah, and their older sister, whom we'll call Jane to protect her identity. Sean was 6 years old. Delilah was 3. Jane was 9. They were not anonymous statistics. Sean dreamed of becoming a police officer. He would walk through his grandmother's house, mimicking the gait of grown men, what his sister later called the man walk, in a letter to the judge. Delilah drew suns in the corner of every picture, big yellow circles with rays shooting in all directions. She had an infectious laugh that made adults smile. Jane, the oldest, was the protector. She stood between her younger siblings and bullies on the playground. She braided Delilah's hair. She helped Sean with his homework. They knew hardship, but they also knew love. Their mother, Vivian Tate, adored them. Life in Riverside and San Bernardino counties was difficult. The children's father, Sean Sr., struggled with substance abuse and cycled in and out of jail. Money was always scarce, but the children had safe harbor at their grandmother Deborah's house, where weekends were loud and warm. They had family trips to the beach where the endless Pacific mesmerized them. They built sandcastles. They chased seagulls. Delilah plopped down in the wet sand, giggling with delight. They had Halloween nights when the whole family dressed up. Delilah went as Snow White and became the hit of the neighborhood. These were real children with real joy. Then, in December 2013, everything shattered. Vivian Tate, 33 years old, was struck by a car on the roadside in Ukiah. The children's mother was gone. Jane would later tell a psychologist with the bluntness of trauma, "Mom went out for milk and never came back." Sean Sr. was left alone with 3 children who desperately needed their mother. He tried, but by spring 2014, he was facing prison time for controlled substances and illegal weapons possession. He needed to decide what would happen to his children, and here, Sean Sr. made a decision that would prove fatal. Instead of asking his mother, Deborah, a woman who loved her grandchildren fiercely, he called his cousin, Tammy Huntsman, who lived hundreds of miles north in Salinas. Huntsman agreed to take the children temporarily while he sorted things out. In March 2014, Sean Sr. drove the 3 children several hundred miles north to Central California and left them with Huntsman. He hid this fact from his mother. A few days later, he was arrested and sent to prison. 3 children who had just lost their loving mother were now without their father, in the home of a stranger, essentially unwanted guests. When Deborah learned her son was in jail, she immediately worried about the children. Incredibly, Sean refused to tell her where they were. He said only that they were safe with relatives. Deborah began searching. She called every agency she could think of. She cried, she begged for help. She came very close to finding them, but nobody helped her. Even though it would have cost a child protective services worker nothing to tell her where the children were, the worker chose not to. The biological grandmother, who had legal standing and a history of caring for the children, was denied information. A stranger with no legal custody rights retained them. Meanwhile, the 3 children arrived at 501 Fremont Street in Salinas. They missed their mom. They missed their grandma. They waited to be taken home. Tammy Huntsman was 39 years old. She had 4 children of her own, 11-year-old twins, a boy, and a girl, a 15-year-old son named Daniel, and an older daughter, Angelica, who lived separately. Huntsman's husband, Kreisel, worked constantly, trying to provide for the family. When 3 more children were added, the house became crowded. But for the first few months, life was almost normal. Huntsman's twins were friendly. They rode bikes around the neighborhood. They played basketball in the yard. They watched cartoons piled together on the couch. Sean tried to keep up with the older boys. The girls played with dolls. Delilah, with her infectious laugh, became everyone's favorite. The twins carried her around. The children went to school. Jane made friends. Sean learned new words. Life went on. But there was one more person in the house. Gonzalo Curiel was 16 years old, a friend of Huntsman's son Daniel. He was sullen, quiet, and had a difficult relationship with his father. He began sleeping on the living room couch, first once a week, then more often, then almost every night. By fall 2014, something changed between Tammy Huntsman and Gonzalo Curiel. They spent time alone together. They went out to smoke. They had long conversations in the kitchen at night. At the end of the year, Curiel discovered that his 39-year-old wife was sleeping with their son's 16-year-old friend. The scandal was brutal. The family lived in a motel for several days while Curiel packed his belongings. He walked out of their lives. Nobody called the police. Nobody filed a report about the sexual abuse of a minor. In January 2015, Gonzalo Curiel, now 17 years old, officially moved into the apartment on Fremont Street. Around the same time, Huntsman's older son Daniel ended up in juvenile detention. Now the household consisted of Huntsman, Curiel, the twins, and the 3 Tate children. A teenager who had been sleeping on the couch moved into the master bedroom and immediately began asserting control. The happy life of the Tate children was over. Curiel began commanding the Tate children. Huntsman did not stop him, she supported him. The Tate children stopped being called to the family table. They were given small portions and sent to their room. Then the bathroom appeared as a place of punishment. First for an hour, then for a day, then for the whole night, then for many days in a row. 2 feet 9 inches by 5 feet 8 inches, smaller than a prison cell. Cold cement floor. Curiel moved the lock so the bathroom locked from the outside. Huntsman's twins used the same bathroom, and when they needed to use the toilet, the Tate children were let out. The twins began going to the bathroom more frequently. It was their silent way of helping. They were afraid to openly oppose their mother and her aggressive boyfriend. Soon it got worse. The children were left locked inside without clothes. They were forbidden to move, forbidden to cry, forbidden to hug each other for warmth. For breaking these rules, they were punished with ice-cold water from the shower or beatings with belts, golf clubs, showerheads, fists. Instead of breakfast or lunch, the children could be tied with zip ties to a bed or chair. One of Curiel's preferred entertainments was filming the crying naked Jane on his phone, while dousing her with cold water. The hunger intensified. A teacher named Kimberly Capuano noticed something strange. When she took the children to the cafeteria, Jane and Sean piled everything from the salad bar onto their plates. They ate quickly, greedily, as if afraid someone would take the food away. Capuano called Child Protective Services and reported her observations. The response did not come immediately. On April 9, 2015, a social worker came to Fremont Street for the first time, responding to a neighbor's call about unsupervised children. The worker had a file, the Tate family's history going back to 1998, containing 21 reports marked high risk. She wrote in her notes, "Apartment is dirty but not dangerous. Huntsman is cooperative. No immediate threats detected." The case was closed. The children remained with someone who had no legal custody. The system knew this. May 19th became the day when a real chance to reunite the family was missed. Someone from the relatives called CPS, informing them that the children's grandmother had been searching for over a year. A social worker came to Huntsman's house again. She explained that the grandmother was not suitable for custody, as decided by the children's father. The worker told Huntsman to obtain legal custody of the children. Huntsman nodded. Nobody checked whether she followed through. And most cruelly, nobody contacted the desperate grandmother to tell her where her grandchildren were. The children continued to exist in a legal vacuum, invisible to the system. In June, a neighbor heard 3-year-old Delilah's screams through the wall and the sounds of blows. She called the police. A young officer came and looked at the children from a distance. His report read, "No signs of violence detected." Huntsman's former sister-in-law came to visit when Huntsman was away and found Delilah tied with plastic zip ties to the bed by her wrists. She freed the girl and confronted Huntsman. She called CPS anonymously. Nobody came to check. In July, Huntsman's own 12-year-old daughter, realizing something terrible was happening in their home, gathered courage and called CPS. "My mum is starving my uncle's children," she said. "Please come." The report was registered. Incredibly, nobody reacted to such a serious accusation. The report got lost in the system. On August 27, 2015, social worker Lauren McFarland came to the apartment after persistent calls from the teacher. She walked into the apartment. Cockroaches crawled on the walls. Filth was everywhere. She looked at 6-year-old Sean. There were clear bruises on his face. "I slept on a toy," the boy answered quietly when McFarland asked about them. McFarland looked at Jane. Her head was shaved completely bald. Her scalp was inflamed, hair burned off by cheap lice chemicals. All 3 children had legs covered in scratches from flea bites. They were thin, starving. McFarland photographed the bruises. She wrote in her report, "No immediate threat detected." Shockingly, McFarland simply left. She left despite the terrible condition of the children, despite the regular signals from concerned people, despite Huntsman having no legal custody. This was the last time authorities saw Sean and Delilah alive. After this visit, Huntsman enrolled the children in homeschooling. They disappeared from the education system. Things deteriorated rapidly. By November, Jane weighed 45 pounds instead of 60. Sean weighed 29 pounds instead of 45. Delilah weighed 18 pounds instead of 30. The children suffered from regular beatings and starvation. Their bodies were consuming themselves. Their organs were shrinking to critical sizes. One day, Curiel caught Jane trying to climb out through the bathroom window, driven to desperation. He dragged her into the bedroom. Huntsman held the girl down while he beat her with a belt. He broke her forearm and shoulder. The bone began healing incorrectly, but nobody took her to a doctor. Another time, Curiel punched Jane in the face and broke her jaw. Jane kept trying to protect the younger ones. She hugged them when they cried from hunger. She whispered that everything would be okay soon. She did not believe it herself. November 26, 2015. Thanksgiving. All across America, families gathered around tables and gave thanks. The Monterey County Probation Department brought a large box of food for low-income families to Fremont Street. That evening, Huntsman, Curiel, and the twins sat down at the kitchen table. 10 feet away in the bathroom, 3 children sat on the cold cement floor. They could smell the turkey cooking. They heard laughter. They heard forks clinking on plates. They received nothing. Even on Thanksgiving, even when there was so much food in the house, the 3 children did not receive a single bite. The younger children cried quietly, pressing against Jane. Hunger had become a constant companion. But today, it was especially cruel. The smell of food seeped under the door, torturing them. When everyone went to bed, Jane could not stand the crying of the younger ones anymore. The bathroom door was not locked that night. They had forgotten to lock it. The girl snuck into the kitchen. She took 1 bagel, just 1. She came back to the bathroom and broke the bagel into 3 pieces. The children ate their pieces in seconds, barely chewing. These crumbs did not make them any fuller, but the consequences were horrific. In the morning, Huntsman discovered something was missing. She ordered all 3 children to come out into the hallway and called Curiel. What followed was several hours of methodical violence. Belts, fists, feet. Jane lost consciousness from the pain. When she regained consciousness, she was lying on the bathroom floor. Next to her lay Sean and Delilah, motionless, silent, eyes closed. Frightened, Jane started screaming. Huntsman pulled Jane out of the bathroom and locked her in the bedroom. She heard things being moved around the apartment, shuffling, banging. She heard Huntsman and Curiel arguing. Curiel was blaming himself for something. He wanted to leave. Huntsman begged him to stay, promised they would handle it. In the morning, Sean and Delilah were gone. Huntsman announced loudly that another family had taken them. They would be better off there. The next day, the move began. Huntsman and Curiel packed things and loaded them into the car. On the back seat sat a large blue plastic Sterilite container. The lid was tightly closed, wrapped with tape. Huntsman, her lover, and the 3 remaining children began their journey to Quincy. On the way, a heavy smell started appearing in the car. Curiel explained it as forgotten fish from a fishing trip. They drove with the windows open in the cold November wind. They spent the night at a Motel 6 in Dunnigan. Huntsman told Curiel she was pregnant. On December 4th, Huntsman rented a storage unit in Reading. They left the container and several boxes there. The smell immediately disappeared. The family arrived in Quincy, a quiet mountain town where a distant relative of Huntsman lived. The twins enrolled in the local school. Jane was kept locked up, beaten, and starved all over again. On December 10, 2015, one phone call changed everything. On a freezing winter day in the mountains, a neighbor spotted a child on the floor of a car. The engine was off. The windows were rolled up. The child was not moving. The neighbor did not go looking for the owners. She did not second-guess whether it was her business. She called Child Protective Services. They contacted the police. That call saved Jane's life. A deputy sheriff arrived. Huntsman came out, calm, ready, with a smile and a story prepared. She explained that her niece had developmental delays and liked sitting in the car. It calmed her down. But the officer insisted on checking on the child. What he found would have shaken anyone. The child looked like a skeleton. She had missing teeth, bruises, scratches, open sores, dirt caked on her face, hair matted with lice crawling through it, fingers bent at wrong angles. She could not stand up. Her legs would not hold her. Paramedics rushed Jane to a hospital in Sacramento. Doctors discovered the full extent of the damage: multiple fractures, critical starvation, dehydration, infections, a shattered jaw, a broken shoulder where the bone had nearly punctured through the skin, broken fingers. One doctor, with 20 years in trauma medicine, would later call this the worst case of child abuse he had ever seen in his entire career. Huntsman and Curiel were arrested on December 11, 2015. Initial charges included child abuse, torture, and inflicting great bodily harm. Bail was set at $1 million each. Curiel, 17 years old, was sent to a juvenile detention center in Butte County. At that point, police knew about only one victim, a mutilated 9-year-old girl. But soon word spread that Huntsman had taken in 3 children from her cousin. Detectives returned to interrogate Curiel and Huntsman. Curiel broke first. He told them about the storage unit in Reading. Late that night, detectives drove to Tarmac Road and opened the unit Huntsman had rented. They were hit with an awful smell immediately. They saw the blue container. Detective Jeff Schmidt, who had 20 years on the force, opened the lid. Later in court, he could barely hold back tears. He called it the worst thing he had seen in his whole career. Inside were Sean and Delilah, the boy who dreamed of protecting people, the girl who drew sunshine. Sean was 6 years old. Delilah was 3. The media exploded with horrifying details. National news outlets showed photos of the blue container, the apartment on Fremont Street, school pictures of the children smiling and alive. The case began drawing comparisons to other high-profile child abuse cases, but what distinguished this tragedy was the sheer number of missed opportunities. Medical examiner Mark Super performed the autopsies at the Shasta County morgue. What he found shocked even him. A man with years of experience handling the worst cases. Sean Tate, 6 years old, weighed 29.5 pounds at 45 inches tall. That is the weight of a healthy 2-year-old. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, complicated by severe starvation. They found a blood clot in his brain between the scalp and skull, a sign of a brutal blow. One rib was broken and had healed incorrectly, meaning the fracture had occurred weeks before he died. He had bruises all over his body, of different ages, old injuries and new. Bruises on his arms, legs, torso, head, and on his genitals, places where a child cannot accidentally hurt himself. His internal organs, liver, kidneys, heart, were all significantly smaller than normal for his age. Delilah Tate, 3 years old, weighed 18.5 pounds at 37 inches tall. She did not even register on pediatric growth charts. The cause of death was blunt force head trauma with critical starvation. There was a blood clot in her brain, pointing to a severe blow to the head. Her upper arm bone was broken and nearly healed. The fracture had occurred weeks before she died. Her lungs were inflamed, pneumonia was setting in. The little girl's body was trying to fight off infection, but it did not have the strength. Just like her brother, her internal organs were undersized. Jane spent several weeks in a Sacramento hospital. Doctors stabilized her and treated the infections. Her jaw had to be operated on because it had healed incorrectly. Her shoulder had to be rebroken and set properly because the bone had fused at an angle and nearly punctured through her skin from the inside. The child psychologist who worked with her noted severe post-traumatic stress disorder. On December 17, 2015, the prosecutor announced that Huntsman and Curiel would be charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances. For Huntsman, that meant the possibility of the death penalty. In February 2016, another shocking detail emerged. Huntsman was pregnant when she was arrested. It was Curiel's baby. On July 22, 2016, she gave birth to a girl at Natividad Medical Center while in custody. The baby was immediately taken into protective services and placed with a foster family. Huntsman's twins, now 12 years old, were placed in foster care. Their father, Chrysel, fought for custody, claiming he had left the home when he discovered his wife's relationship with a teenager and did not know the extent of the abuse. He was accused of abandoning his children in a dangerous situation. In February 2018, after 2 years of waiting for trial, Huntsman accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to all charges: 2 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of torture, child abuse, and conspiracy. In exchange for taking the death penalty off the table, she received 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus 3 more life terms, plus 9 years. She waived all appeals. She will die in prison. Gonzalo Curiel refused the deal and went to trial. In April 2018, in the courtroom, they built a replica of the bathroom from the Fremont Street apartment, 2 feet 9 inches by 5 feet 8 inches, with a toilet and cement floor. Jurors could walk inside and understand what it was like to be locked in there. Jane testified through a special screen so she would not have to see the accused. She told them about the bathroom, the hunger, the beatings, the bagel, the last time she saw Sean and Delilah alive. Nearly 3 years later, her voice still shook with the memories of those days. People in the courtroom cried listening to the child's account. On April 23, 2018, it took the jury 1 hour and 20 minutes to find Curiel guilty on all counts. He received 3 consecutive life sentences. Since he was 16 at the time of the crimes, he is eligible for a parole hearing after 25 years. Monterey County Social Services Director Elliot Robinson publicly acknowledged the system failures. Nobody was punished. The reforms targeted the system itself. They implemented new protocols, additional staff training, and stricter oversight of open cases. But for Sean and Delilah, it was too late. They were buried under a single headstone. The boy who dreamed of protecting people, the girl who drew sunshine. Sean was 6. Delilah was 3. They lived short lives in the richest country in the world, where there was plenty of food, help, and protection. Yes, 2 monsters killed them, but the truth must be faced. It would have taken only one person doing their job correctly to save them. But this is not the only story. Across the country in Pennsylvania, another child was living through a nightmare that would end just as tragically. His name was Scotty McMillan. On the night of November 4, 2014, just weeks before Sean and Delilah were killed, paramedics were called to a rundown mobile home in West Callan Township, Chester County. They found the body of a 3-year-old boy. His name was Scott Jacob McMillan. He had significant bruising all over his body. His nose was bleeding. The nurses who received him in the emergency room, professionals who see horrible things every day, cried. Scotty did not survive. He had been tortured to death over the course of 3 days by his mother and her boyfriend. Years later, his older brother Ryan, who witnessed much of the abuse, would write a letter to his dead brother. "Dear Scotty, I am so sorry that you got killed by Gary. I was trying to protect you. I have good news and bad news. The good news is Gary is in jail. The bad news is you are in heaven and not with me, your brother Ryan." Ryan is now about 17 years old. His beloved brother Scotty will always be 3 years old. Scotty was born on January 26, 2011, to Gillian Tate and Lauren McMillan. Although his parents had been in a relationship for several years and had an older son, Ryan, they did not get along well before Scotty was born. But Gillian was lovingly awaiting the birth of her son, posting ultrasound pictures on social media with the caption, "Looking forward to meeting you, dear baby." Ryan also dreamed of a baby brother. When Scotty was born, his father was out of town, and Gillian's sister Kim picked her up from the hospital with her newborn son. Scotty was an incredible baby, very calm and affectionate. He immediately won the love of Aunt Kim and Aunt Tara, his father's sister. They supported the young mother in the absence of the children's father. Scotty had bright red hair, blue eyes, and a sweet smile. His paternal Aunt Tara said he and Ryan looked a lot like their father. Scotty loved Thomas the Tank Engine. His favorite color was green. Like many kids, he loved to play with cars and transformers, draw and sculpt, play hide and seek, and have tickle fights. He loved to sing in the back seat of his Aunt Kim's car as she drove. But most of all, he loved his older brother and tried to imitate him in everything he did. In 2012, Gillian and Lauren began their relationship again and were photographed at a rave, dancing together. But by the end of 2013, the couple had officially broken up. Lauren moved out of state to Overland Park, Kansas. After the breakup, Lauren's family did not see the boys often, mostly getting information about them through Gillian's social media posts. Friends described Gillian as a normal, easygoing, fun-loving girl. Her whole life was centered in Chester County. She worked at the local Walmart and managed to combine motherhood and a social life, occasionally finding time to hang out. 6-year-old Ryan went to the Coatesville area school district, and 3-year-old Scotty went to kindergarten. Gillian seemed to be doing well. At the same time, Kim and Tara began to notice troubling signs that Gillian's financial situation was getting worse. It was reported that Gillian was looking for a man, an older man who would help her financially in exchange for her time and affection. It is unclear how, with such high demands, Gillian began dating Gary Fellenbaum. Gary, like Gillian, worked at Walmart in a low-paying job. He was 6 years younger than Gillian, married, and had an 11-month-old daughter. He was a large man, weighing about 275 pounds, and had a short temper. He told Gillian that his relationship with his wife had long since ended and that they would soon be divorced. But for now they had to share a house because the woman and her child had nowhere to move. Then Gary invited Gillian to move in with her sons. In early October 2014, Gillian moved in with Gary. She was not deterred by the old, run-down mobile home in Westcalm Township, a poor rural neighborhood, nor by the intimidating, quiet Amber, who actually lived in the house with her baby daughter. Shortly after they moved there, one of Gillian's friends saw her at work at Walmart and said that Gillian did not seem to care about herself. At the same time, the school noticed the absence of Ryan and Scotty for the last full 2 weeks. A school representative called and wrote to the children's mother, but received no response. Then, according to procedure, the school representative made a home visit. No one answered the door, and the school representative left a letter for Gillian Tate. They did not know that Gillian had removed the children from the area 3 weeks earlier and had not provided the school with the children's new home address. No one could have known that tragedy was just around the corner. On the night of November 4, 2014, Gary's wife, Amber Fellenbaum, called 911 to report that little Scotty was unconscious in their home. His lifeless body was found by paramedics and he was rushed to the hospital. Scotty was in such terrible condition that when he was brought to the emergency room, the nurses cried. Unfortunately, 3-year-old Scotty did not survive and passed away shortly after. He had significant bruising all over his body and his nose was bleeding. When authorities searched the trailer home where Scotty lived with his mother and brother, they could only find one photo of the boy. They also found a makeshift whip, a bent metal ledge and an aluminum strip, all of which had been used to torture the child. In addition, holes were found in the walls of the trailer home, where it was believed that the little boy's head had been slammed. Scotty's mother, Gillian, eventually admitted to authorities that both her boyfriend Gary and herself had abused little Scotty. She told how they laughed when a 3-year-old child was hung by his feet in a doorway and beaten with a whip. They also beat him with a frying pan and metal sticks and finally beat him to death. For 3 days, Scotty lived an endless nightmare. He was punched in the face and stomach, beaten with a makeshift whip, tied to a chair and beaten, hit with a metal bar, hung upside down and beaten. And his head had been smashed through a wall. The day before his death, Scotty woke up and could not eat his breakfast, cinnamon toast, and kept spitting it out. This upset Gary, and he and Gillian tried to force the boy to eat it, but he still would not, or more likely, his condition was already so bad that he could not eat. Then Gary became even more angry and started punching Scotty in the face and stomach. Gary and Gillian then took him to his room, where they continued to beat him. At one point, Gary lifted Scotty behind his back and slammed him against the wall. When the 3-year-old woke up the next day, his face was very red and swollen. He failed to eat breakfast again, so Gary thought it was disrespectful and punched him in the face with such force that he fell off his chair. Gary then sat Scotty back in the chair and tied him up with electrical tape while he squirmed. He then began hitting the 3-year-old again, causing him to vomit and pass out. Gillian and Gary then picked Scotty up and put him in the shower, trying to revive him. The couple left him in this position for about 30 minutes, after which they realized it was not working. Then they decided to get Scotty out of the shower and put him on a partially inflated air mattress. There was no blanket or pillow, just an empty rubber mattress on which they placed the unconscious Scotty. After that, the couple left the trailer home to go shopping and then to get pizza for dinner. When they returned, Gillian and Gary realized that Scotty was still unresponsive. The couple then decided it was a good idea to have sex. And then Gillian decided to take a nap. Waking up around 7:30 p.m., Gillian found her son still not regaining consciousness and yelled for someone to call 911. According to Gillian, her boyfriend Gary had picked on Scotty more than his older brother, who was 6 because, unlike his brother, Scotty still tried to resist. And apparently, like a complete sociopath, Gary enjoyed that. Scotty's older brother Ryan also showed signs of abuse and was placed in the care of relatives after his brother's death. On November 6, 2014, Chester County District Attorney Tom Hogan announced the arrests of Gary Fellenbaum and Gillian Tate. He held an emotional press conference, and the details of little Scotty's death shook all of America. "They killed a child under the age of 12 by torture," Hogan said. "We will seek the death penalty in this case." Gary Fellenbaum was arrested and received 16 charges in connection with Scotty's death, including first- and third-degree murder, endangering the welfare of a child, assault, and reckless endangerment. The boy's mother, Gillian Tate, was charged with 15 counts, including murder. Both she and Gary were denied bail, and soon the prosecutor announced they would seek the death penalty. Gary's estranged wife, Amber, who also lived in the home, was charged with child endangerment and placed on $500,000 bail. Amber told investigators that she first became aware of what was going on in the home about 2 weeks earlier when she saw Gary spanking Scotty. This was after the boy did not respond to his words, and he felt disrespected and became angry. She also said she saw Gary and Gillian beat the boy with a green frying pan a few days before his death, and witnessed Gary tie Scotty to a chair and then beat him. And Amber did nothing to stop it, but she immediately dialed 911 as soon as Gillian asked for it. She did it quickly, before Gary could think of the situation and forbid it. The authorities did not believe that Scotty's abuse was caused by drugs or alcohol. Instead, they assumed it was simply because Gary felt so disrespected by a 3-year-old boy. The school the boys attended confirmed that although they had been absent for the past 2 weeks, no signs of domestic violence had previously been reported. In April 2017, Gillian Tate pleaded guilty to third-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. In exchange for the death penalty being taken off the table, she agreed to testify against her ex-boyfriend Gary during his trial. While she was in court, Gillian claimed that she had no excuse for her crimes and accepted responsibility for Scotty's death. However, she also stated that her boyfriend Gary had manipulated her mental issues, kept her sleep deprived, and kept her a virtual prisoner in his home. Gillian said, "I wish to God I had my whole life back. If I had never met Gary, then my son Scott would be alive." After his brother's death, while undergoing psychotherapy, Ryan wrote a letter to his dead brother. Another letter he wrote to his mother later in 2017 was read aloud in court. It said, Dear Mom, in November of 2014, you, Gary, and Amber were trapped in a house of torture. The torture was you guys. The victims were me and Scotty. Scotty got killed. I got beaten. You were the worst mother I've ever known. You just watched us get hurt. I wish you never met Gary. He is really evil. He nearly killed me. You are the reason Scotty got killed. I thought parents were supposed to protect us. Now you are in jail for your time out. Gillian Tate, 33 at that moment, was sentenced to 42 to 94 years in prison. Gillian never had to testify against Gary because just a few months later, he pleaded guilty to Scotty's murder to avoid the death penalty. Gary Fellenbaum was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Amber Fellenbaum also pleaded guilty, and she was sentenced to 6.5 to 16 years in prison. Amber did not attempt to minimize her fault in what had happened to Scotty. She also consented to testify against her husband. Amber served part of her sentence and was paroled at the beginning of 2023. Shortly after Scotty McMillan's death, a candlelight vigil was held, and people gathered in front of Gateway Church in Parksburg to remember the little boy. Later, on November 12, 2014, Scotty was buried in a private and beautiful ceremony. Thomas the Tank Engine toys are always near his grave in Northwood Cemetery in Chester County, Pennsylvania. Ryan was adopted by his paternal aunt and her husband. After Scotty died, people mailed in thousands of dollars to help Ryan re-establish his life, and a trust was opened for him. Unfortunately, these funds have not been used to help Ryan with his development, hobbies, treatment, or psychological support. The founders of the fund have refused to allocate money for any of the child's needs except for his future college education. This is very strange, and it is unlikely that the people who filled the fund had this in mind. It means that for the past 10 years, the child has not seen a penny of this money. These two cases, Sean, Delilah, and Jane in California, and Scotty and Ryan in Pennsylvania, are separated by geography but united by a common thread: systemic failure. In both cases, warning signs were abundant. Teachers noticed, neighbors noticed, family members noticed. In the California case, social workers visited the home 5 times and documented concerning conditions. In the Pennsylvania case, the school noted absences and attempted contact. Yet in both cases, the children remained invisible to the system that was designed to protect them. The question that haunts these cases is not whether the perpetrators were evil, they clearly were, but why the systems designed to protect vulnerable children failed so catastrophically. Child Protective Services in the United States operates under a difficult mandate. Workers are tasked with balancing family preservation against child safety. They work with high caseloads, limited resources, and incomplete information. They must make judgment calls in situations where the consequences of error are severe. But these structural challenges do not fully explain what happened in these cases. In California, social workers visited the Fremont Street apartment 5 times. They saw bruises. They saw malnourished children. They saw an apartment infested with cockroaches and fleas. They documented a household where the caretaker had no legal custody. And yet, 5 times they concluded there was no immediate threat. The phrase "no immediate threat detected" appears repeatedly in the case files. It is a phrase that, in hindsight, seems almost incomprehensible. What constitutes an immediate threat if not visible bruises, malnutrition, and illegal custody arrangements? Part of the explanation lies in the protocols that guide social work investigations. Workers are trained to look for specific indicators of abuse and to assess risk using standardized tools. But these tools are imperfect. They rely on the worker's ability to gather accurate information during brief visits, often in the presence of the suspected abuser. Children, especially traumatized children, may not disclose abuse when questioned. Abusers like Huntsman and Curiel can be cooperative and plausible. They can offer explanations for bruises and poor conditions that seem reasonable in the moment. The apartment is dirty but not dangerous. The child fell. The family is struggling but managing. And in a system where workers are overwhelmed and under-resourced, there is pressure to close cases and move on to the next crisis. But there is another factor that cannot be ignored. The children in both cases existed in legal gray areas. In California, the Tate children were living with a relative who had no legal custody. Their father, incarcerated and unreliable, had placed them there informally. Their grandmother, who had legal standing and desperately wanted custody, was denied information about their whereabouts. The system prioritized the wishes of an incarcerated father over the safety and legal rights of the children. In Pennsylvania, Scotty and Ryan were removed from school without notification of a new address. Their mother moved them into a home with a man she barely knew, and the school's attempts at contact went unanswered. Both cases illustrate how children can slip through the cracks when custody arrangements are informal, when families are transient, and when communication between agencies breaks down. The psychological dynamics within the homes are also instructive. In both cases, the primary abuser was not the biological parent. In California, it was Gonzalo Curiel, a 17-year-old boy who had been groomed into a sexual relationship with a woman twice his age. In Pennsylvania, it was Gary Fellenbaum, a man with a violent temper who felt disrespected by a 3-year-old. In both cases, the biological parent, Huntsman and Gillian Tate, enabled and participated in the abuse. This dynamic is not uncommon in cases of severe child abuse. Research on familial child torture indicates that it often involves a dominant abuser and a compliant partner. The partner may participate out of fear, attachment to the abuser, or a distorted sense of loyalty. In Huntsman's case, her relationship with Curiel was illegal and exploitative from the start. She was a 39-year-old woman in a sexual relationship with a 16-year-old boy. The power imbalance in that relationship shaped the household dynamics. Curiel, elevated to a position of authority in the home, exercised control over the Tate children with Huntsman's support. In Gillian Tate's case, her relationship with Gary Fellenbaum appears to have been driven by financial desperation and a desire for stability. She moved into his home despite red flags: his violent temper, his estranged wife and infant daughter living in the same trailer. Once there, she became complicit in the abuse. Her later claims that Gary manipulated her, kept her sleep-deprived, and controlled her suggest elements of coercive control. But these factors do not absolve her. She participated. She laughed while Scotty was tortured. She left him to die while she took a nap. The role of bystanders in these cases is also significant. In California, Huntsman's own 12-year-old daughter called CPS to report that her mother was starving the children. That call was documented but never acted upon. Neighbors heard screams and called police. Teachers noticed the children gorging themselves at lunch. Huntsman's former sister-in-law found Delilah tied to a bed and called CPS anonymously. Each of these interventions represented an opportunity to save the children. Each was ignored or inadequately investigated. In Pennsylvania, Amber Fellenbaum witnessed the abuse for 2 weeks. She saw Gary spank Scotty, beat him with a frying pan, tie him to a chair. She did nothing until Gillian asked her to call 911. Her later cooperation with investigators and her guilty plea suggest some degree of remorse, but her inaction during the abuse is damning. The aftermath of these cases prompted calls for reform. In Monterey County, the social services director publicly acknowledged the failures and implemented new protocols: additional staff training, stricter oversight of open cases, better interagency communication. But these reforms are reactive. They address the failures after children are dead. The challenge for child welfare systems is to identify and prevent abuse before it becomes fatal. This requires adequate funding, manageable caseloads, and a culture that prioritizes child safety over bureaucratic efficiency. It also requires legal frameworks that protect children in informal custody arrangements and that empower family members like Deborah, who are willing and able to provide safe homes. The legal outcomes in these cases reflect society's revulsion at child torture. Huntsman received 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus additional sentences. Curiel received 3 consecutive life sentences, with eligibility for parole after 25 years. Gary Fellenbaum received life without parole. Gillian Tate received 42 to 94 years. Amber Fellenbaum received 6.5 to 16 years and was paroled in 2023. These sentences send a message: society will not tolerate the torture of children. But sentences alone do not prevent future tragedies. Prevention requires vigilance, resources, and a willingness to intervene even when the situation is ambiguous. The children who survived these cases carry lifelong scars. Jane, the 9-year-old who endured months of torture and watched her younger siblings die, faces a future shaped by trauma. Her physical injuries, broken bones, malnutrition, have healed, but the psychological damage is profound. She has severe post-traumatic stress disorder. She testified at Curiel's trial, reliving the worst moments of her life to secure his conviction. Ryan, who watched his little brother be tortured to death, wrote letters to Scotty and to his mother that reveal the depth of his pain. "I thought parents were supposed to protect us," he wrote. That simple statement encapsulates the betrayal these children experienced. The trust fund established for Ryan's future has been mismanaged, with funds earmarked only for college and unavailable for his current needs: therapy, stability, normalcy. This is yet another failure of the systems meant to support vulnerable children. The deaths of Sean, Delilah, and Scotty are not anomalies. Every year in the United States, hundreds of children die from abuse and neglect. Many of these deaths occur in families known to Child Protective Services. The common threads are poverty, substance abuse, domestic violence, and systemic failures. The children who die are disproportionately young, under the age of 5, and vulnerable. They depend entirely on adults for survival, and when those adults fail them, they have no recourse. The moral weight of these cases falls not only on the perpetrators, but on the societies that allow such failures to persist. Sean and Delilah were buried under a single headstone. Scotty's grave is marked with Thomas the Tank Engine toys. These children are remembered by those who loved them: grandmothers, aunts, siblings, teachers, neighbors, people who saw their humanity and tried, however imperfectly, to help. The broader question is whether society will remember them, whether their deaths will prompt meaningful change, or whether they will become statistics. Cautionary tales invoked when budgets are debated and policies reviewed and then forgotten. True crime documentaries like this one serve a dual purpose. They tell the stories of victims, ensuring they are not forgotten, and they hold up a mirror to the systems that failed them, forcing uncomfortable questions. Why did 5 visits from social workers not save Sean and Delilah? Why did a teacher's call to CPS not result in intervention? Why did a 12-year-old's desperate plea go unanswered? Why did a school's home visit not uncover the horror in Gary Fellenbaum's trailer? These are not rhetorical questions. They demand answers, accountability, and action. The legacy of Sean, Delilah, and Scotty is a call to vigilance. It is a reminder that evil thrives not only in the actions of abusers, but in the inaction of bystanders and systems. It is a reminder that children are vulnerable, that they depend on adults to protect them, and that when adults fail, the consequences are irreversible. Rest in peace, Sean, Delilah, and Scotty. You deserved better. You deserved safety, love, and the chance to grow up. The fact that you did not receive these basic rights is a moral stain that no amount of reform can fully erase. But your stories can serve as a catalyst for change, a demand that we do better, that we see the children who are invisible, that we act when action is needed. The question is whether we will listen.